Pascal, I'm sure you've seen this in me quite a bit. I just give no fucks. And I just said, all right, like whatever the consequences are, I'll take them, because the risk, because you mentioned before risk, the risk to reward is so high. What can I ask? I actually don't even know. What does JP stand for? Like just perfect, or like what is it?
Wait, you'll be blown away by this one. That's a new one, actually. But no, JP stands for Jean-Pierre.
Oh, okay.
And
okay, yeah.
Living in Canada, you would think, oh yeah, you're francophone, but I'm actually not. My parents lived in France before I was born, and then we moved to the UK. So I was born in the UK. So I actually don't know a lot of French. I hate to say. I was
besides French people. That's all you got, right?
Yeah, and I moved into the most Anglo, town in Canada, in Nepean, when I came here. So it's not like I was in a good position to learn, even though I took like years and years of French. I do my best, but I don't think
I had the exact same question when I met the guy. I was like, why? What's this GP stand for? I mean,
it's always a mystery. You always got to find out.
Yeah.
I know.
There's the backstory.
You never know, like if they're like hiding their name because they're a murderer or something and don't want to be like found out. You never know. So always good to be safe. So why don't we? Oh, sorry, Pascal.
I was just gonna say, why don't we do the exact same we usually do, and then just walk us through your professional journey or like your design journey, because I know it's gonna be an interesting pivot at one point in yours, which I want to touch on further. But just give us the walkthrough.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Bear in mind, I'm actually in my 50s now, early 50s. So, I've been in the tech industry for almost 30 years. So apologies if this, kind of goes on through a couple chapters and maybe a sequel or two. But I think in the beginning, right, it's like I think I've always been a visual person. And so I've always been a designer by trade ever since I was a kid. I was like fascinated by design, architecture, automotive, industrial design. So moving into a design career was super easy. It was like so natural. So I was going to go. I took architectural technology right out of high school, and I took that for a year, and then I dropped out. So it just didn't really kind of click with me. I mean, there was just too many drawings, and nothing was digital at the time. So I just got bored, I think. So I started my own business, and it was custom painting business. So it was motorcycles, motorcycle helmets, goalie masks. Started that out and did that for a couple years, and that business was called Shell Shock. I did it with a partner I'd met, and so that was really interesting. Like when you're kind of 18 years old and starting your own business, and it was definitely the school of hard knocks, but it was fun. And then later on, eventually closed our doors. It just it's not like it was. Probably would have been better if we had, opened our doors in California, like Troy Lee Designs or something like that. So, but later on, I got into digital design. It was 1994. I was just about to go to Algonquin to go into the graphic design course.
Wait, hold on one second. Yeah. I was born the year after that.
Look at that. I know. You can have a couple of lifetimes in my career, I think.
Sorry, I had to do that. So
yeah, no worries. Well, see, that's the thing too. I mean, I work with a lot of younger people, right? And they're born in the 80s or whatever, and I'm just like, wow, So anyway, it's all good. So yeah, like in the early 90s, it was like tech boom, internet started. There was all kinds of multimedia agencies that did like CD-ROMs and whatnot. So no one was paying attention to the internet. And so I just kind of hooked up with with these tech guys, like technologists, consulting. My brother was in into tech at the time, but there was no designers on the early days of the internet. So I just basically kind of started to help them out. I volunteered a little bit at the beginning, and then just I was just self-taught. And then I eventually moved on from there, and I guess I built up enough, personal cred that I got headhunted by Dell Computer, which back in the day, they were one of the big e-com companies of the time. And that kind of brought me to Toronto, where I had worked with a couple other digital kind of agencies. So yeah, it's my earlier days were a lot of internet and a lot of design, a lot of websites, and just being exposed to being thrown into every project. And there was no rules at that time either, which is kind of interesting, right? It's like, so I didn't go through any of the traditional hoops or anything like that in order to, build up my skills. And I think a lot of it too is just the culture of the companies back then, like the entrepreneurial mindset is they had no rules. Like they were all rule breakers, right? So it was really nice to be exposed to all these smart people, but all of these people have thought really differently. So that kind of brings us, midway to my career, and then I came back to Ottawa, worked for some agencies over here, but eventually found that, just agency life it was really fun. It was fast. You were always building new websites or new digital brands and things like that. But I found it was starting to feel like a little bit of a revolving door. Like you do this like real quick, project, knock it out the door. And then, but you wouldn't see it beyond that, and there was a lot of, I just started to notice that, maybe there's something else out there. And then, I started to talk to some people in the tech community, and then ultimately got some opportunities, in a product company where I could just take my skills that I had, learned doing digital marketing and website design on the one side of things, and leverage it in a startup. So that was really my transition to go to being a product marketing, where you were all of the energy that you were investing was going to be permanent or semi-permanent, right? And that was really interesting. Like I really liked the idea that anything you do, you can look at the analytics, you can work with a team long term, you can own it. That first company I worked with, it was called Spotwave. They were a wireless repeater, so they did hardware to help boost signal in inside buildings and homes where signal was poor, just because of the building architecture or whatever. And so I was able to do all the marketing. Even actually got into one of my small checkbox dreams was to do some industrial design. Actually ended up doing the industrial design for the product at the time. So I most of my roles, I get my hands dirty to varying degrees, and and ever since then, it's been usually my roles oscillate between either some kind of commerce, mobile, or some kind of new tech that's kind of rolling out. Sometimes come back to studio type environments again. Like right now, I work at this company called Relish Studios. They're actually like a animation, games, and digital studio that's got a bunch of different locations across Canada. They're kind of like below the radar, but they're really super talented. And so just helping them with the marketing now. So hopefully that that gives you a little bit of a taste test for my journey anyway.
What's it like to get into industrial design from a non-industrial design perspective? Because there's it's a whole discipline in and of itself, and you have to know so much before going into it, because especially a physical thing is permanent, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you screw it up, you have to recall all those products, or it just doesn't work. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would never claim that I'm as a good industrial designer or have the real chops that those guys do. But there's something in, so what I did there is I concepted, visual designs that represented the shape, the form and the shape, and without being the technical files, like all the CAD files and everything like that, that are 3D, solid 3D or something like that. But they use. But I worked with two industrial designers or mechanical designers, and they would take the kind of core. Once I got the core design, kind of people liked the way it looked. It was obviously relevant in the environment that this repeater was going to be used.
Oh, wait, and so when you say design, are you referring to like a physical, like you make like plastic mock-ups? You don't have a 3D printer or something at the time.
Yeah.
Were you making things, or were you just drawing it out?
Yeah,
and
it was
just,
literally like
writing down?
drawings at first. Yeah, it was hand drawings and then Illustrator drawings and then a little bit of Photoshop for photorealism. I don't use 3D software, or I didn't at the time. So yeah, it was all kind of just to get a kind of a rendering that looked okay. This looks like it could be a real thing, and it was very, because I did the brand at the time. It was very much connected with the brand. There were subtle, things that kind of connected, that made it continuous, and right down to like little, LEDs were at the time. The brand was blue. There was blue LEDs and little details like that. But then I worked with the mechanical designers because they're very much concerned about the builds, like how things snap together, right? Friction lock type things, and they're very concerned about, apart from just the performance itself, and that's the board that's inside the plastics, right? Like a repeater, wireless repeater is essentially, probably, it's a board. There's heat sinks on the back. There's an antenna hidden into the board, and like an omnidirectional antenna, but it's covered in plastics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Cool.
the part that I kind of created was, how are we going to put some decent plastics on here that, like, represents the brand, looks okay, looks different. And so I'd work with the mechanical designers to make sure that we were keeping the cost down, the bill of materials, the BOM, to within a spec. So we would kind of, brainstorm and figure it out. And yeah, it was a really good experience.
That's
Very
cool.
cool. How, like, I want to ask a question, because let's face it, you and I were working before Mitch was even born. How do you, like, because you were able to pivot and stay fresh to the game. Like, I've worked with you very closely at one company, and how did you, as an individual, like, how do you stay fresh? How do you stay up to trends? How do you, like, what's your perception on that?
Yeah, I think you just want to be interested. You just got to keep your eyes open and be learning. And I mean, I think just constant learning is it's interesting. And it really just, I mean, you're the same way, Pascal. I know you are, is that you're constantly learning. You're constantly interested. You never want to be in the same place. You don't want to, be in any kind of like, where there's so much going on. I mean, let's face it, we got to be competitive too. So there's that aspect, right? Am I the most competitive guy? Probably not. I'm sure there's people that are far more than I, because like, but yeah.
We also have like a family, right? So, if we were comparing each other, not that we have to, not that we would, but someone that is like in my position where doesn't have kids, still have a significant other, but you have a family to take care of. There's other aspects that kind of stop you from going all the way in that sense, but you can still be really competitive, and clearly you are trying to keep up with the industry.
In a way that you kind kept modern to the thing, but you also pivoted, right? You evolved as the craft of design evolved. And I think what I've noticed a lot today and these days is like, and some stay connected to what they're doing. They don't want to, like, the design craft, let's face it, it's so wide. like even I started in like photoshopping pictures for Microsoft, which is like, that was so boring. But I then, evolved, and I think you evolved as well. And I think that it's okay to be open to evolving. And like right now you're doing marketing. I'm
Mhm.
assuming you've never thought you would be doing that when you were in school, but now like you're head of marketing for Relish. So I think you've evolved with it. And
Mhm.
you think that's something that allowed you to stay fresh and in the game?
Yeah, well, you're right about like there's in the industry, it's so broad, right? Like if you want to be a designer, you could be a print designer like a traditionally. You could be a designer of just pure, motion. You can be a UI designer. Like there's so many avenues that you can go down, or you can just be a creative director. Maybe you don't get your hands as dirty, but you love working with people, you love concepting, but you're not the hands necessarily that executes, right? So um and the same is true in marketing, right?
Mm.
You can't, it'll be very difficult to become, an expert in all of the different areas like PR and ads and ad campaigns and social media itself is just like vast, right? So, but I think openness to learning and just I'm a problem solver by definition. I just if depending on what the problem in front of me is, then you're gonna kind of unfold that, learn. Like right now, it was we're doing a Kickstarter. Actually, there's uh, one of our one of my compadres at work, and they've just launched a Kickstarter campaign. Well, he's kind of a one-man show, Mike Cassie, and they're launching this board game called Weirdwood Manor on Kickstarter right
Mm.
now, and he's done a fantastic job, like kind of building up the marketing campaign. But I mean, he's doing so many things, and he's doing them really well. But he just needed an extra set of hands, so I just kind of chipped in and helped just a small piece, which is just to get some of the Facebook ads going. But it was kind of interesting where you can just I've worked with Facebook ads before, but it was fun because there's been maybe a year gap between the last time I used it, and enough things had changed. It was just kind of nice to dig into it again and start to kind of get into it. Which reminds me of a quote that a buddy of mine said. Steve McKenzie, a great designer in Ottawa, and he said, JP, design is a muscle, and 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 to me it's so true. It's like getting your hands dirty within, whether it's like learning marketing or UI design or whatever it is, right? It's just like you got to get in there, and that's how you stay kind of fresh and fit.
Agreed.
So, what does it take to be really good then? If not just fresh, but really good?
A lot of hard work, I guess. But I'll let other people be the judge on what's the definition of good. But um,
But what does it mean to you?
to me, it's being competent and being able to deliver on what your mission is, right? So if that's building a brand from scratch, kind of like bootstrapping, and like a lot of startups I've worked for, they don't have a lot of money at the beginning, right? So either going to build it yourself or you're going to outsource, maybe you hire someone or work with an agency. But I think the definition of being good is being competent and delivering.
Right on.
I don't know. What do you guys think? What's your take on something like that? I mean, it's pretty broad, right?
Well,
Open
I guess let's scope it to your actual role. Like, what would be the definition of a satisfactory employee that would be doing your role, for those that are listening that want to aspire to be like you?
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, I look for when I'm building a team. I look for people who are first off, it's like you have to recruit them, right? So you got to get the right kind of people. So anyone who's, has demonstrated previously that they have some skills in the particular area, whether it's social media or, design skills. If you're a designer, I have to see a portfolio, right? That's just like, if I don't see a portfolio, like I'm not looking at your resume, right? So have to demonstrate some competence there. But from there, it's really, a lot of it is attitude and hustle and ability to kind of navigate and stay calm. And I think a lot of team building, um, you know, is the culture of that team, right? And it's, if people are tuned into their job and you give them a role, part of success and being good is being given a role that gives people enough room to grow, right? So if you give people a small little, small portion of the role and it doesn't really have a lot of room for growth or adventure or anything like that, they're probably not going to perform as well. Like, I mean, I know that there's you have to kind of trial out some people, but I've usually leaned towards giving people more room, make mistakes, um, especially in a startup. It may be different in other type companies where there has to be a lot more kind of discipline and rigor. They have more money to spend, but I personally think is like a lot of that is giving people room to grow. And it's like, if we work together, we plan what the objectives are, and say Pascal, I was working with you, and it's like we talk about what the objectives is. You're going to come back with solutions. And then, if I was, the manager or something like that, I'd be like, okay, so, all right, well then you've got your mission, right? It's like maybe some feedback, but it's like, okay, go do it. I'm not going to get in your way. And I think that's how I've managed to be able to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's, as a leader, is also being able to, give that to other people and allow them to grow. Because small companies, you have to grow fast. You have to move fast. You can't be afraid, so.
Yeah, I think as a leader, you need to hire people almost smarter than you and give them room to grow and just remove the obstacles out of their way for them to succeed.
Absolutely.
Like that's the role of, and I'm not seeing even like a manager, but a leader as an individual inside a company. It doesn't matter like your ranking, but anybody that's, a tier level or below or anything, your role as that leader is to empower them, give them room to succeed and fail, but remove the barriers. That's how they're going to push. And more oftentimes than none, if you get out of the way, they're going to do it better than what you probably would have had if you set them up for success.
What I like about what you just said, though, is that, when a leader, I guess when you define a leader compared to a follower, or I don't even want to say follower, because I don't think people necessarily are all followers, but if you had just the two polar opposites, if you had a leader and a follower, the real difference between a leader and a follower is that a leader does, right? Mm-hmm. And they do it first, and they just get things done. And then people go, oh, cool, let me continue doing that. Mm-hmm. And it's like you can step into that role of leadership wherever you are at any level that you're at, but you just have to do things. And it might not be the first, but it has to be in a way stepping up to the plate. Mm-hmm. That could be first. Sometimes, usually it is first, but you have to step up and actually do and commit to an action. And I think that a lot of people are timid from doing that. Do you have any tips on like how somebody can start to reconcile that and like in whatever role they're in, start to do more?
Yeah, well, I guess, everybody has fear about, moving to the next level or taking something on where there's risk, right? Like where there's risk, there's fear, but where there's risk, there's potentially some reward, personal or otherwise. And I think people just have to kind of go in with a certain level of fearlessness. It was kind of funny. You were talking about kids, right, Mitchell? And it's like, you can't you can't be afraid of having of doing some of these things, and because everybody who was successful had to do it wrong probably the first time or the second time until they did it enough that they got good at it, right? And you'll never move if you don't take some chances. And hate to say, the old cliche, like fake it till you make it, but you got to kind of put that mindset is that, you know, if if I was this person, how would they do it? Maybe that's the way, right? Like if you have your own personal phobias about how to approach something, then sometimes it's good. I remember reading a book when I was younger. It just said how, well, put your mindset in someone else's shoes, and how would they approach that? And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe maybe I don't need to be as as worried. But I think also, sure, go ahead.
Yeah. No, you continue.
Yeah, I was just going to make a point. Pascal was saying, how you get out of the way. And I think there's also something to be said about making it an environment for your team and the people around you that they know that if, let's say, startups, everyone's learning, everyone's kind of jostling, bumping into each other. It's like everyone's expected to move fast and perform. So I usually take the approach. It's like, okay, we're all on a mission. We're going to bump into each other or whatever as in our roles, and things are not always going to work right because projects don't always kind of run perfectly. But you kind of like know that, well, I've got your back, and you got to look out for people, or if they're junior to you, is that they know that even if they make a mistake, they're not going to be reprimanded. They don't have to look out for the jobs. Like, yeah, I don't mind if you make a mistake. It's like, it means that you're probably moving fast and you're, getting a lot of stuff done. And usually the faster you move and the more you get done, there's going to be there's going to be things. So I kind of like to take that approach. It may be right, maybe wrong, but it seems to.
What I like about what you said, like the first part you said was about emulation. And then the second part you said was about what do you do when you get to that point and make it available for others to achieve. One thing that I tend to do, which I've noticed, I guess now that I'm reflecting on your point of emulation, of like trying to emulate another leader that's done it really well. It's like, oh, how would this person do it? And then you go off and try to emulate their actions based on their previous actions. But I tend to not think of in my case, another strategy somebody can use in my case, and Pascal, I'm sure you've seen this in me quite a bit. I just give no fucks. And I just said, all right, like whatever the consequences are, I'll take them, because the risk, because you mentioned before risk, the risk to reward is so high, right? You're going to have maybe a big risk and like lose out and then get fired. Like that's like the biggest risk everyone like mostly fears. But if you succeed, the success of that is so much greater that if you need to get a new job, like no biggie, you can say you tried doing that and you had a fun time and you have a good experience, you had a good story to tell. But if you don't try it, then I think that I would regret that more. So in my opinion, especially when I work right now with Pascal, if you just give no fuck, and I hate saying that because like that is in and of itself a cliche. And there's like a book with the curse word, whatever.
Yeah.
This is gonna be marked as explicit, by the way. So feel free to curse.
Yeah, right on.
I think when you then take on that as another strategy, that mentality, you can let go of some of those fears and you can just commit to the action. It's something that, they do at Amazon. They say we commit, and I don't know what the exact phrasing is, but they kind of like don't agree, but they commit. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of bouncing a little bit off that, even though, it's not about agreeing or not, but having the mentality of like, okay, like who cares if you fail? There's going to be other opportunities out there in the world. Like you're not going to end up in a box. That to me is like so freeing. It's kind of like why Pascal and I started this podcast, like, and the newsletter and the other stuff that we're doing. Yeah. It's because we don't care if we fail. Like we fail, we had fun, we learned a lot, and then we go back to our other jobs and do other contracts and stuff. So that's another strategy.
Absolutely. And I like, even you're learning so much, or even if you get a number of podcasts and someone finds some utility out of it, that's not failure, right? I mean, I suppose if you had some, this, maybe an ambition to grow it to, 3 million subs and whatnot. But I usually think is that every step forward is something kind of gained, and like you say, you can't worry too much about what will go wrong. It's just, and I find usually, I'm sure it's the same with you guys, right? It's like you got a passion that you're kind of riding anyway. You got an idea, you just want to see it through. Like, heck, why not? Like, fuck it.
I think it's you need to be in a mentality where you fail forward. Where it doesn't matter if you're failing or not, but you fail forward, because anytime you fail, it's a lesson forward that you're not going to repeat, or you're going to adjust your next move on. So that failing forward, like if you see it in a way, it doesn't matter. Like I'm a big advocate of fake it till you make it. Like everybody that comes to me, do you not? Yes, I know how to do it. Like I'm gonna learn how to do it. Like I know, but the thing is, I know in my capabilities, I know my strengths, and I know if I don't know it right away, or I don't know 100% of it, I'm gonna learn it. So like I think it's just a matter of like confidence. It's building on top of your career and your successes, and like when you look back at everything you've achieved, man, like your portfolio of life is impressive if you take the time to look at it. It may not be like the new design trend that you've designed. Okay, maybe not. But if like the portfolio of success that you have are valuable to be able to add any success to any company or anybody. So I think it's interesting in that format of fail forward, learn, move on.
I love that line.
Okay, so
it's a great line.
There's one thing I don't know if I disagree with it, but I would kind of pull out.
Push it.
I'm going to push it. Kind of like Jenga, just pop it right out. I think that unlike every other industry, designers have a unique ability to transition their skill sets to other applications. And like an accountant can't necessarily design a logo. Like, I'm sorry to say that. A doctor's not going to spend time, building a website. Not going to happen. Very unlikely, at least. But, I think that we have this, it's already baked into our discipline, fake it till you make it, because like how many designers knew exactly how to do that logo, or that, like you're saying before, the plastic around the thing was your first time doing it. Like you didn't say no, but you're responsible for getting it done. And that's kind of a lot of times what designers are. They kind of are just the ones who are responsible for getting those creative, quote unquote creative, which in my opinion, I don't even think it's creative. I just think it's like a necessary like fixture of, I guess, emotional design. But, we have it baked into our discipline, which gives us a greater advantage over the rest of the population, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think there's the connective tissue between, because if you look at like the design practice and those skill sets, and you look at marketing, but they're all, at the end of the day, a designer is customer facing. He's creating the logo that, the end consumer is recognizing, or the UI is, whether the UI is the product or it's just the storefront, but it's like, this is all packaging, and this is all like, so it's very much so. And in marketing, you're customer facing, and by the way, we use designers, or we build the website, or we inform, the product management of, some of the things that, the product may need. So I find that's why that's why a designer, like the skill sets are transferable. And in fact, I never saw that line, other than the fact that, yes, the roles, you are responsible for different things as a designer, or as a UI designer, or as a product marketing person. And even like within just marcoms and product marketing, like there's there's a division there in terms of the traditional kind of responsibilities. But these are all things that you can augment. A designer could easily augment their skill set with learning a couple of columns of skills, whether it would be say marketing automation, say like HubSpot or one of these tools, in conjunction with their their design skills, and they would be a pretty powerful. That's a good combination. Or learning the social platforms for advertising, right? Like there's a whole like you want to work remote, just learn Facebook ads. You know what I mean? Like it's so deep that you could just spend a lot of time there. And then but as a designer, you bring all those great skills and into those, building ads and stuff like that. The platform's pretty easy to use. So I think that's very transferable.
I think I think in the designer space, the more you move up, the more your skills become transferable. The more you can transfer to project manager, you can transfer to marketing, you can transfer to product owner, you can transfer to like manager or like VP. I think business roles. I think the more you design in this space, the more you realize that you acquire a lot of skills and the more you can grow. So it's not just pixel pushing. You can transfer a lot of the skills.
Although there's a lot of pixel pushing.
when you start, there is a lot.
I think a lot. Like overall, you're still for a long time.
You made a good point, Pascal, as far as so the people who can become a product designer or even a product manager. Like I think of the the digital products these days. So if you're a UI designer, UX designer, you understand use cases, you understand like kind of target audiences, you understand like functional specs and wireframes and all that. Those are all things that actually, like I've met product managers who were former digital designers, and they kind of just moved up the food chain a little bit, so they knew how to direct other designers, UI designers, but now they were responsible for the overarching kind of product vision and stuff. So yeah, there's definitely some, interesting career paths that you can take, even if you're not in
the going from an IC to a manager is a really interesting path because, in my opinion, at least, a good manager doesn't mean, a good designer doesn't mean that you're going to be a good manager, and vice versa. Because like there's a lot of people managing, right? And then there's like the project management. But a lot of the time I noticed that when people moved up to become managers in the past that I've worked with, they were really bad at actually managing people, even though they understood. I think they're really good at understanding the projects and the project needs, but they're very bad at understanding the people that they're working with needs, because no longer are they collaborating. They're actually forced in a position of, we got to do your HR stuff. We got to deal with the money stuff. We have to deal with all these other incentives. So they become kind of rocky in that. And then actually recently, Facebook apparently, or Meta, whatever it's called, they're asking a lot of their managers to go back to becoming ICs. And they're letting go of a lot of other managers. So I would love to kind of jump off of that point a little bit. And like, what do you think about how going backwards into an IC role and the importance of a designer versus a manager? Because it seems like there's many experiments of like people firing all their managers and they have no managers. And then it's like, certain teams, like certain sizes, they're, you don't really want a bunch of managers and a different like level of hierarchy in a small team. You want to keep it pretty close to like central control. And like, if there's like only two levels of like executives and then there's everyone as a contributor, that works really well. And you don't want to add an extra layer in between. But when you have so many people, you have to scale the decision making. You have to start to delegate. You have to figure out how you can organize all of these people into the same goals. And that requires then some levels of hierarchy. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think, some hierarchy is good because it also separates, I haven't worked since Dell. I haven't worked in a really big company where, they always had teams and they had team leads, And the only person that you would really deal with, like say on Dell Online, the e-commerce side, I worked with 3 executives, and one was marketing, one was on the tech, like the CTO, and one was on the business side. And so you didn't have to deal with, the CEO or any other people kind of coming down and potentially distracting or redirecting the team. So it's probably good that there's some kind of ownership of the, that kind of middle layer of management. And then they can kind of keep the team happy and kind of on focus. But having said that, yeah, it's tricky to, there's all kinds of, there's so many facets to being a manager or to being a designer on both sides and the way that they perceive. I mean, I know that, when I was a manager, I'm sure there was guys that I could tell that some people didn't like. It's like, this is my design. And they almost didn't like a little bit of that, the seniority perhaps, that would potentially direct. And I think there was kind of like a good back and forth of ideas like flowing both ways. And then as a manager, you gotta, get around different personalities, people in different stages of their career, different work styles, and you're trying to rally everybody around a shared mission, get stuff done, keep, maybe there's outside, forces, like in the company, that you got to try to kind of manage and keep people, in a good state of mind. And so,
I got a couple of thoughts on
yeah,
a
go
lot
ahead.
of like
I mean, it can go any
Mitchell's
direction.
No, but I have thoughts on like Mitchell's comment and your point of view. I don't see going from a manager to going back to IC as going backwards. To me, like as an example, as a design principle, you're the equivalent of what like manager director is. It's just you're just pushing pixels or influencing that craft. And even if you're not at just a senior or just a designer who transitions to manager, I don't see it as backwards. I just see as like it's a lateral move. You're one day, in my point of view. I also think that once you get to a manager, the hardest thing is get the fuck out of the way. That's the hardest thing that we tend to do as designers who transition is we still want to influence, we still want to pixel push. Like if you're not a creative director, you're just literally just a manager, it's hard to make that transition because you got to have total faith in what your designer team is going to be doing. So it's hard to do that, but you got to, in my opinion, get out of the way, put everything you have and allow them to grow and design. And I think, I don't know, I think it's going to be hard. It's hard for me if I'm not a player coach in a way. So I know I still struggle with it, but still, I think it's that point. And another thing is too, is that oftentimes people think that to be the best design manager, you previously had to be a designer. I was on this big Twitter fight like a couple of weeks ago on that, and I totally disagree. Some of the best managers I've ever had were non-designers. They were just good at managing people, opening up the rooms for you and getting things out of the way so you could do your best work. Yes, you need a sense of design and outcomes and business and impacts and whatnot. But I don't think you need to be an ex-designer to be a great design manager. I don't agree with that. And
yeah, I'd say that's
yeah.
true. Yeah. I feel kind of the same way. It's is that really a manager has to be, well, he has to understand the business, what the true objective is, and not get down into the weeds of design, even though he may have some, subjective feelings on that. But it's like at the end of the day, but they really have to be a good people manager, right? Build the right talent, allow them to do the job that they were intended to do, and keep everyone kind of in the same direction. So yeah, that's a good point.
I think Mitchell has his arms crossed. He's going to come back with the counter argument right now. I know it. I feel it.
This is a podcast where we get to challenge each other and push back,
Cool.
even if we don't agree with what we say. It's just a cool space to chat. I would say the only thing I don't agree with per se is what you said about it's not like going backwards in your career when you go from manager to IC. At Facebook, I don't think they change like the amount of pay. It's kind of like the same level, whether you're a manager or an IC. They just kind of transition it the same way. And I remember reading about that when I was doing the interview process, which I declined, by the way, after I finished. So screw you, Meta. But what I would say, though, is that there is actually a problem with going back to IC. If you don't go back to IC immediately after trying out manager, you spend a lot of time doing management, you kind of forget and you kind of lose track of the tools. And what we're understanding now is how important it is to stay up to date and stay fresh with tools like ChatGPT. If you're not trying it out, you're not using it in your work, like we're using it in our work for marketing, right? Doing a lot of marketing materials, using it for copy content, using it for ideas for titles and keeping things engaging and stuff. It's a great thing just to bounce ideas off of, because it's always going to give a response. Even if it's a bad response, it's going to give you a response. You can then get inspired to get a better output out of it.
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
But what do you think about that? Like when you're not constantly going at the pixels, you're not constantly actually working on the craft. You go to people's, and then you switch back after like 5 years.
Yeah.
You're missing out all the tools, all the time training, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Again, it's that like design is a muscle thing, right? So it's like I would never kid myself to think that I have the chops, because these guys, people used to do the design and say Photoshop, and then it's moved to InDesign, then Figma, and so you got to be kind of to be a high performance, not only a good designer with the sense of it, but it's also about speed to get to the good ideas really quickly and knock designs out. And I mean, if you're kind of like me, I'd be like a dinosaur, right? There's no way I could see what I would want. And I would rather like just art direct and say, here's some ideas. And then I riff off of what the designer is doing. And I think I even did that back in the day, which is designers come up with some great stuff and they're technically good, and it would just be to help guide them, as in, oh, you were doing an awesome thing here, and then somewhere along the line they kind of get off track, or say just kind of bring them back and riff off those ideas and allow them to do their best work. So
what I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the tools of the future are going to make you, specifically your role, extremely important, and even more important than it is today, and make roles like we previously all had, IC roles, less important, because you're going to creative direct a computer to do the work for you now.
Yeah, we're doing
like AI is going to do that.
Yeah, some of the guys that work here at Relish, like they're playing around with it, and they're an animation studio, so they obviously know how to do it the traditional way, but we're using some of the other tools, and they
like
put
what?
What's that?
Like what?
Oh gosh, what's the name of the tool that they are using?
Is it like a video tool, or is it a image creation?
It was an image creation. Like I was using
like Stable Diffusion or Adobe Firefly or something.
I think Firefly was one of them, and maybe one other one. But it basically just looked like it was like an interface. It's like literally, it's like /imagine, and then you put in like dystopian, pickle sales guy, and it was just and then what came out was just incredible. Like it was just mind blowing. And that's just with a little bit of work. So, but even then, the guys that are using it knew how to manipulate, that particular tool. But I think the learning curve is not super huge. And I think just all of those tools are accelerators. Maybe it's, they still need human input to direct them to get the right result. They may not replace 100%, but I think they just make things faster. like instead of me researching about, the merits and of the metaverse as a marketing tool for museums or for youth and education, and give me data to prove that, it's like I put that in, and then it just like builds out like a outline of an ebook. I'm still going to have a writer go through it, and we're going to still add to it. But damn, I mean, it was able to create that with so much more easily. Just at least a raw outline. So it's pretty awesome.
What I love is like you're almost like composing it, like you're kind of giving it enough direction to make music, but it can't do it on its own. It still has some direction being informed by you. I wonder how much of that is like pushing the limits where it's like every bit of it is by itself, or like a 50% is you and 50% is the machine. You kind of get inspired by it and you kind of modify it, because you can kind of take it and then redo parts of it in like different tools. You can kind of retouch it up and stuff. That's really cool.
It really
We're going to
comes
be
down.
maestros soon.
What's that, Pascal?
I said we're going to be maestros, like just with the hand wand and just guiding everything from the back.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I think there is that point where you can truly just compose whatever you want in terms of something written or animated or rendered or even like a short film. It's going to be able to do. They're just actually, one of the things the guys told me is that depending on which tool you use, the result is largely based on the data that it has already seen. And different tools have different data, and that's how it kind of spits out the result. But so you only have to assume is the more access as some of these tools will probably like aggregate together into kind of like giant brain, and that anything that you want visually or motion or like as a designer, it's going to be able to spit out for you with a certain degree of like would it actually be good quality. And then it's just about, okay, can now whatever it renders out, whether that's a website or an app or something written, is that it's not just one and done. It's that you can actually throttle it and have some degree of editing ability to affect the result, right? Mm-hmm. And then that again becomes then it's kind of more tailored, and then you're being really precise with the result. So it's pretty cool.
So not to cut this short, but we're almost on time, and I definitely want to ask our final question, which is, since we've been talking about how you've been shaping the world of design, how has design shaped you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I just look around me and I'm always inspired. So my wife makes fun of me because it's like, I pay attention to visual things. So, she goes, "Oh, why?" Like, I don't know. I just see the world around me. I'm sure it has impacted everything I do, whether it's like, brands and whether it's products, or whether it's going to be something outside of the work environment. Like, before I die, I want to, architect my own house. I mean, I have to do that, right? It's just one of these things. And so I just hope that I get to do the things that I really dream of. And I just think it's a great industry. It's always changing. There's so many avenues, like you can just go nuts. And I think it's just for anyone who's in, is a designer now or thinking about it, or even, picking their path. There's no rules to anything anymore. And if you can be reasonably good at something and you have passion and you got a good attitude, just pick the direction you want to go, because I'm convinced that, you can really make it happen.
Awesome.
Very cool.
Thank you. Do you have anything to plug, or you want to tell us where anyone can find you online?
Yeah, you can. I'm going to plug a couple things. Sure. So right now, Relish. So I was mentioning Weirdwood Manor. It's a super cool board game. It's on Kickstarter. Take a look at it there. It's super cool kind of fantasy game. Also, I'll make a little, if you want to look for me, I'm on Instagram, and you can look for Rome Apparel. And that's kind of my little side hustle. I kind of do, it's a mix between like my own personal adventures and my t-shirts and things like that I'm kind of just interested in. I just like e-commerce and selling stuff. And so, yeah, so look at Rome Apparel or romeapparel.com. And yeah, feel free to give me a shout anytime. Happy to talk. I'm on LinkedIn too, of course. So JP Burdett, hit me up.
Cool. Yeah, we'll leave all
You'll
that.
see a lot of, and you'll see a lot of motocross stuff on his Rome stuff on Instagram.
Yeah, actually, that's another one. So I divide up all my Instagram. So I've got like Raven and Duro. That's all off roads. I got a bunch of them. It depends because they're so specialized, right? So
yeah, you are such a marketer. So good at like narrowing the scope and just focusing it and knowing your audience.
Niche marketing, like people who were in, and that was me, right? I loved VW vans and that sort of thing. That's kind of how Rome was born, was my love of travel and that sort of thing. So yeah,
I love that. I love the idea of like how you get inspired to create something that somebody can also wear, but it's like there's a meaning behind it. I would love to talk to you sometime offline, and then maybe we'll come back on the pod and talk about it, about a clothing brand that my girlfriend and I want to potentially work on, and maybe you can give us some tips on that.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. Sounds good.
Sweet. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thanks. Guys.